So, sure, we starting now. Hello everyone. We have with us Dr. Narayan Prasad, Chief Operations Officer of Science Search, and he's going to present on the topic navigating the cosmos entrepreneurship in the space. Dr. Narayan is the Chief Operations Officer at Science Search, the world's largest marketplace for the space industry that streamlines procurement for clean building space missions with analytics. Science Search has helped engineers to procure for over 400 missions, passing on procurement opportunity worth over $800 million suppliers space. The co-founded Spaceport Saranath, India's first dedicated think tank to capitalize the fledgling Indian space economy, and with India and international goals, where he serves as director for research and knowledge. He has authored over 100 publications in various outlets and holds a PhD in supply chain. He is also an elected member of the International Institute of Space Law and host of the New Space India Conference. On to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Oh, I have an echo. I think you need to Okay, I hope you can hear me now. I am going to try to share my screen so that you can see my presentation. Yeah, I hope this is visible to you guys. Basically, my presentation here is going to not focus on a lot of the technical aspects of space. I think most of you are maybe very well versed on a lot of these things, given that you are from IIT Madras, and I think my presentation is mostly going to focus on the entrepreneurship angle of building ventures, and what it is, the ground realities of doing something like building a space startup in India, for example. So just to add to kind of a very brief overview of where we are starting out from. The word new space is very famous in the space industry nowadays. New space really means that people are starting out to build companies that are mostly B2B or B2C, because space as a sector for the last 60 years or so has been mostly businesses trying to sell to the government, including businesses in India, for example, where essentially government would be the only customer, and essentially you would build a technology company to be able to sell to the government. And this is what most of the companies, including Boeing, Lockheed, and many others in India, including Godrej and so on, have done to a large extent, that is sell to the government as a customer. So this field of new space is barely about 20 years old, because it's a challenge like companies like SpaceX took to build new technology by putting in private investment to see if there is like a B2B or a B2C market potential that they can tap to lower the cost of access to space. So when you hear the word new space, think about new startups that are trying to do interesting new things, rather than be a traditional government contractor to a large extent. But the whole new space landscape in India itself is very new. You might have heard about several companies in India like Skyroot or Pixel, or many others that are out there today. And most of these companies did not exist even 5 years before, to a large extent. So this is a very, very recent phenomena. For those of you who are there, many of you may not have been even born maybe when SpaceX was conceptualized, which was already now 20 years ago, to a large extent. But in our memories, we don't think of SpaceX as a company that is already over 20 years old, to a large extent. But this is the timelines in the space industry are extremely large compared to other industries in typical software SaaS kind of models or e-commerce and things like that. Space needs a very long gestation period for products to mature, for companies to be built, and so on. So, in fact, I started out trying to build space companies more than 10 years ago. And during that time, for example, there was no real capital in India for any kind of space investing. So you see today that there's a lot of self-made billionaires in India. People like Mukesh Pansal, who was invested in Skyroot, or the Zerodha brothers, or there's so many of them today in India that they understand investing in deep tech as high net worth. Hello?
Yeah, I think that meeting got dropped.
Okay, so I don't know where I stopped off or dropped off.
Yeah. Are you able to share your screen?
Yeah, can you see it now? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna. I don't know where I really dropped off, but basically, I was just saying that so space in India has been really new to a large extent. As about 10, 12 years ago, when I started out looking to build my first space company, there was no real capital available. Where investors were not really present at that time, because deep tech investment in India was not really a thing back then. I think today you guys have a really interesting opportunity, because a lot of the interesting things are lining up. And timing is one of the key things to make ventures successful in any industry to a large extent. And today, I think not only investing and VCs and high net worth individuals, like Mukesh Bansal, or the Zerodha brothers, or many others who are interested in these kinds of things, are available. But also large VC funds are interested in a sector like space today, and have backed several companies. Um, there's been about 150 new companies that have emerged in India over the last 3-4 years that are looking to do space, really space startups, right? So obviously not everyone will succeed. A portion of them will fail, and a large portion of them will fail, and a portion of them will succeed. But the ones that will succeed will probably make it very big to a large extent, and that's a great outcome for the country at large. The other important thing here is that the government has shown a lot of interest in space as a sector. So you can see that the prime minister himself has met several startups, and they have created in space as a promoter and a regulator in our sector at the end. And I think obviously missions like Chandrayaan 3 that ISRO has pulled successfully has really created a vibrant environment for space in the country. There's a lot of people following space because of this kind of exciting missions that are happening, and there's going to be a extremely good supply of people who are looking to enter the sector for somebody who is really looking to build a venture at the end. So the talent pool will look to new sectors like space, which are more and more exciting for young people to try out things in at the end, versus maybe many other sectors which have gone through their phases of interest in the public to a large extent, right? So um, just a note on how do you think about space venturing. Unlike many other sectors like e-commerce or software based companies and things like this, space is really two main activities happen in space, which is either you are building rockets and satellites and ground systems, which is primarily hardware development to be able to get to space to a large extent, or you are building applications that use GPS, or they use satellite imagery or satellite communications at the end. So we can really broadly classify the space sector into people who want to build rocket satellites and ground systems as the upstream of the industry, and people who want to build applications who are in the downstream of the industry. It really is a question of which type of risk are you willing to take uh, at the end, because doing something of the nature of building satellites and rockets are really high risk, obviously, because it involves a large amount of capital that is necessary to be able to even build up the necessary infrastructure and the teams and the technology to be able to go to the market at the end. You can see that even teams like Agnikul, who are at IIT Madras, and Skyroot and so on, are already possibly over like 5 years old or so, and they haven't even got to the launch pad to test a full scaled up engine that or a demo of their core technology to a large extent. They've been doing some very uh, you know uh, preliminary experiments on their technology that have been released to the public, but not really full scale demos of engines of the first stage or things like this. So obviously it takes a lot of time and a lot of capital at the end. The reality is that you cannot look at space and say that the US is doing something and therefore we can replicate some of that in India. So because the amount of money available in the US for venture capital high net worth individuals is probably something like 100 times that of what is available in India today. So you still need to if you are doing a space venture in India, you need to realize that the amount of capital that you probably need to raise will come at some point of time from abroad, because there's not going to be many investors who have the appetite to give you 50 million, 100 million and things like that in India, in a extremely high risk segment where the product is still very immature to a large extent. And you can see that a lot of the companies in the US are routinely raising 100 million, not even having the full product ready to a large extent. So these are some of the interesting realities of space venturing. The other part of all of this is that when you are doing an upstream rocket or a satellite venture, there should be exit options for people who want to obviously you want to have the company succeed, and then you need to return money to investors as well. So this landscape again in India is not fully mature. So for example, if a company is fairly successful in the US, maybe a company like Google or Lockheed or Boeing or somebody else will buy them out because they want to capture the value that they are creating to then bring them into their larger company at the end. This kind of merger and acquisitions, landscape in India is still very, very, very early stage. You don't have many large aerospace companies that are doing stuff in space where they have a turnover of, let's say, over $1 billion a year, to a large extent in the aerospace or even a space, landscape at the end, right? So, and there are entry into public markets, taking company into the public markets, and not as easy as in India as much as they are in the US, for example. So it really is a question of if some of you want to really begin building space companies, what type of company you want to build, because if you want something to be low risk, you want to get into something like using satellite imagery. And today a lot of people are building AI models, machine learning models on satellite imagery to do specific applications for agriculture or fisheries or infrastructure or things like this. So obviously, if you go down to the ground applications of space, you will find a large pool of customers that you can address, because if you are building either rockets or satellites, there is a limited pool of customers in the market. So at no point of time there is more than like 100 companies that are building satellites on a yearly basis, for example. So the amount of companies that you can address as a launch company or a satellite company has a natural cap, because of the size of the market in the upstream at the end. And so the competition is very high there because a lot of people want to build rockets and satellites. But the application ecosystem means that you are basically building software that uses space as a part of the backdrop at the end of satellite imagery or communication or position navigation and timing applications to then go address the customer needs. So for example, let's say you want to digitize the entire electric vehicle ecosystem in India that uses Navik, and UPI for many things, for example. Then the pool of customers that you can address is in the order of multi-million number of customers at the end. So and then there's also the lower risk, because you're not really building anything extravagant in terms of hardware that is as complex as building rockets or satellites. And there's obviously faster iteration cycles, the faster product to market, and you have much less requirements in capital to find product market fit, unlike a satellite manufacturer or a launch manufacturer. So these are some of the hard and soft realities. There's nothing wrong in choosing one or the other. It's just a question of what type of appetite you have for risk, and which type of company you want to build at the end. So as I said, there are some very high risk areas for Indian entrepreneurs that people are trying out. So for example, there's companies like Pixel who are trying to build both the capability of being able to build and operate satellites, and being able to service customers by the imagery that they are generating. And so they're not really in the business of selling satellites that they are building, but they're in the business of using the satellites that they are building to provide services that are based on imagery at the end. So this is a extremely hard thing to achieve at the end. And the risk is quite high there. Obviously, building launch vehicles again is a very, very hard thing to do. Even today, even outside of SpaceX, there is no launch operator in the private sector that have come up in the last 20 years, including people like Rocket Lab, who have had the track record of a company like SpaceX, so far. Even now, I think about 1 in 7 or 8 launches from Rocket Lab still fails to a large extent, right? So there is still a lot of failure with other companies, and really, I think SpaceX is something of an aberration when it comes to the private space industry landscape because of this reason. So there is still, we are still in the very early phases of this in India, because it'll be very interesting to see where companies like Skyroot and Agnikul and others go from where they are today. And then, especially for people who want to build large constellations of satellites that can serve purposes like communication or other applications as such, it's again an extremely high risk area. So I think SpaceX is now operating probably more than 4,000 satellites at the end. And the entire fleet of Indian satellites that ISRO operates is no more than 50 at the end. So the scale, is look. You can just compare the scale of this, because SpaceX is then also launching them on their own and operating them and providing services. So it's the amount of investment that is needed to work this is extremely large. I've seen that recently there's been some companies that have come up in India that are also pitching stuff like satellite servicing, on orbit refueling, some people who want to build space tourism through balloons and modules and things like this. Obviously, these are again extremely high risk areas where more than anything else, you need extremely large capital requirements to make things happen. And the question really is not about the is about having the ability to raise the kind of money that is necessary for all of this, to be able to even try out building the technology for it. So like, I think companies like Axiom in the US that are building a space station perhaps have raised today more than $500 million. So I don't know if in India we've matured the ecosystem to that level yet. Maybe in the coming years or so. But for anybody who wants to get into these areas, you need to know that most companies will perhaps die because of them committing suicide because of lack of money at the end, more than the lack of engineers or technology or all of this, because these are areas where you need to continuously raise money to be able to keep building technology until you prove it to be right. And the amount of time to reach break even, SpaceX as a company, I think, has only declared that they are broken even after 20 years at the end. So they really were unprofitable for 20 years. It's a 20 years of down payment or investment to be able to build the kind of technology that they have. And I think only in the last quarter or so they mentioned that they're profitable for the first time, which means that essentially in 21 years or so, that's the first time that they've declared any positive revenue in their balance sheet, right? So that's really a very high risk way of building stuff, where you need to then continuously keep fueling the company with money, and have new investors step in every single time at higher valuations. And so this is something that I don't know yet how things will work out, but we'll have to see in the coming years in India. So for anybody who wants to build application based companies, I think the ecosystem is really mature. And as I said, there's a large addressable market and a large opportunity present here at very low risks. So if some of you want to go into these kinds of areas and so on, so today I think there's a lot of software and cloud eating into space to a large extent. So there's been a number of companies like Satshore, Crop in Vasar Labs. You can look up some of these companies. They've all come up with SaaS models that will allow using satellite data to create some sort of an intelligence or some sort of productivity and efficiency in different markets. So, for example, I think Satshore has tied up with CIBIL, which is the credit scoring organization in India, to do credit scoring for farmers when they go in for requesting loans, for example. So obviously there's like 100 million farm families in India and above. So the natural market for that is an extremely large market pool, given that there's over 100 million farm families that you can address using such satellite imagery, right? So there's still very early days of Navik actually being used commercially. When you look at models such as platform as a service, PaaS, and like SaaS, software as a service, these models can really be built. One of the interesting areas to look at is, for example, if you are in any major city in India, or even a second tier city, you have all of these toll booths where people are wasting tons of time because they have to go through the fast tag system, or there's a big waiting line. I mean, obviously, today we have the technology possibility to simply have every automotive company to integrate Navik and have an integration from Navik to the vehicle location, and then from the vehicle location and the ownership of the vehicle to UPI, to then to automatic toll collection at the end, where you then really don't need to have toll booths in the entire country at the end, and people just get notified that they're entering a toll lane, and then you collect automated collections. You do automated collections based on the mile that vehicles are going. So you can imagine that there's hundreds of such things that you can build that can create efficiency in the overall economy, and that will allow you to then create uh, you know very large and profitable companies that use space in the background. So just to give you a legacy example, there's about 150,000 or about 200,000 ATMs in India, I think. uh, Almost all of them are powered by satellite communication. But when you go to an ATM machine, you don't really think that there's a satellite link behind. You just assume that you will put in your card and you draw your money out at the end. But then there's a satellite link there in most cases, where even the deepest of the villages, you can then withdraw cash out of your bank account, right? So this is the sort of role that satellites play in the background, because there's not there's no need for a bank or even a company building this kind of ATM service to tell the customer that there's satellites that are powering this at the end. But then they are essentially enabling transactions to happen, and for efficiency to be built up, and monetizing it at the end, right? So this is how downstream applications can be built to a large extent. There's still a lot of opportunity in India to build proprietary hardware for application areas like micro weather. It could be, for the drone ecosystem that uses precise satellite positioning for package delivery and all of these things, because simply using GPS has still a lot of error rates that can be over 10 meters, and this may not be sufficient for automated drone delivery and things like this. So there's a lot of proprietary hardware development areas that you can imagine that can use basically satellite based position navigation timing, or satellite based IoT and things like this, where you can come up with solutions to make things more precise, make things more enable certain kinds of services to happen, which will not really happen if they're not really refined using these kinds of areas. Uh, I would say that there are some very interesting unexplored areas that nobody in the country I've seen is looking at. So, for example, if you want to disrupt an entire industry, at the end you need to start something completely new that has a technology backbone behind it that nobody in the industry today uses. A good example of that is that there is no real bank, for example, that is let's say completely AI driven to a large extent, that does automated lending for farmers, that is based on an app, for example. And then based on the location that's mentioned, you use the satellite imagery over the last few years to then say, I'm going to lend you this money based on the risk that I've assessed, and so on. So it's a it's still a very paper based process, and there's not much done in terms of legacy banks being used be able to do this. So it could be, for example, a trading firm in stock exchanges, that are doing stock trading that uses satellite data to basically use the insights from there to do automated trades on the stock exchange. So obviously, the insights that you gather from satellites have uh, give you the extremely high, highly sensitive, time sensitive information that you can then use to do the trades at the end. And so today you can see that some of the hedge funds and the trading firms in the US have started using some of this kind of tactics at the end. And as you move towards automated trading or machine based trading to use such things, such tools, then there is not not a human but basically machine based trading that uses such intelligence, right? So somebody can go build that. Or for example, if you look at a new age health insurance company that uses satellite data and localized weather data to offer plans according to risk, so where you charge a very less premium amount that is based on less health risk, less pollution and things like that, and higher at higher areas. So you can do a lot of these kinds of interesting things. There may be 100 other things that you can come up with, but essentially satellites and satellite data, or even satellite imagery, position, navigation, timing, or even satellites themselves, if you are able to build some, can be the infrastructure that you would run for such new age disruptive models in existing industries. And this is really vertical integration that is taking it to the very end of disrupting an entire industry on itself. So I've not seen many people in India think about these things, and I think these are areas that are really ripe for innovation, for people to come up with ideas and execute on them. uh, I also briefly talk about which type of teams I see succeeding. Often the problem in the space industry is that the space industry becomes an accumulation or a gang of space people who only talk to each other and don't involve experts from other sectors. And typically, today in the space industry, if you have to succeed, you you need to have a diverse set of talent pool for a company to succeed. So often a person like me comes from the space industry, understands satellite technology or so on, but I don't understand, let's say, software engineering. I'm not a front end, back end, user experience, cloud engineer, or a machine learning engineer. I'm not a business expert in a sector like mining or agriculture or any of that. So really, I think if you are trying to build a team, and a successful team will have three things here, right? So one, it'll have a technical knowledge of the space systems, and either in the upstream or downstream. It will have knowledge of software, so service delivery. I mean, software is also now eating into satellites and rockets at the end, because a lot of the work there is now taken on by stuff like FPGAs and many other aspects, where you really need to be an embedded software person, or even a lot of interesting things that are happening there. That software teams are today about 50% of teams building satellites and rockets are made up of 50% of software people today. So it's really that these three areas that you need to combine. So often this is lacking in many of the teams, because either it will have a team full of you know s- team full of software people who don't have market knowledge, or if you'll have a team full of space people who have no market knowledge or no software talent inside. So a really good team, you can see this across many of the very successful companies, will have these three things together. And if you are really forming an early stage team that you're looking to build out a real venture for, these are the three areas that you have to have, either co-founders or the first hires in a company, to be able to then build out a space venture today. Um, there's some specific opportunities in India that I want to address that are very interesting. So obviously, I said that there's a lot of high net worth individuals and venture funds that are looking for good space companies to invest in. So it's a great time to start looking at building space ventures. There is an extremely large pool of technicians, quality control engineers, process engineers that are available in vendors that ISRO has created for many years now. So there's close to like 500 ISRO vendors who routinely provide support to ISRO for all the missions. So they have an extremely large talent pool of these types of people. I don't think they have an extremely good talent pool in design engineering knowledge, or knowledge in specific areas like FPGAs and yeah, semiconductors and many other areas that touch on new age IP. But then if you are specifically looking at hiring technicians, quality control engineers, process engineers, that's where there's a lot of talent that is available for people to tap into. There's an extremely large amount of facilities that are still available to be leveraged. A lot of the new companies, like Pixel, like Dhruva Space, like Skyroot, are also creating their own. So that can be leveraged by people who are now starting out as well. Obviously, ISRO has an extremely large talent pool of even retired professionals that are coming out who have 30-40 years of experience of doing space. So I've seen many teams now use them as a part of the technical due diligence process and review committees and things like this. And there's obviously a very supply rich market for talent because of ISRO's missions and a lot of the startups being recognized. Recently, I think for one of the companies that I advise, there were 9 open positions, and I think they received something like 10,000 applications for people who wanted to get into that company. So you can see that it's an extremely supply-rich market when it comes to this. So I want to also talk about briefly about specific challenges when it comes to doing space ventures in India. Unlike many other sectors like semiconductor or fintech or other kinds of electronics or automotive or so on, space is a sector that doesn't pay very well. In fact, most people who come to the space industry are more passionate about doing something in technology rather than just optimizing for the pay that they're going to get. It's also a kind of interesting landscape that most of the vendors that ISRO has pay typically half of what ISRO pays its own engineers. So you can see that because there is no real incentive for people who are inside of ISRO to leave those positions, because obviously, if you go to many other countries, even if you go to places like US, a salary that, for example, a company like Boeing pays or even SpaceX pays to its top engineers might be that of 2 times more of what NASA will pay its engineers on its payroll. And typically, it's very usual in the Western countries that as a government employee at a space agency, your salary is typically in the order of half to one, 3/4 of private sector. So in India, it's almost reversed, which is very interesting that ISRO is still the biggest paymaster when it comes to the salaries at the end. And I think recently the chairman of ISRO said that nobody from IITs joins ISRO. And he was mentioning that, when we tell them about our pay, that 60% of the people left the room or so on. So you can imagine that that pay is already one of the highest in the country when it comes to the sector itself. The only people who are paying very well today are the startups who have raised a lot of money in the country, and so typically that's what the case in. So it's really difficult for it's easier for people to convince somebody who's in NASA to be then employed at SpaceX if they're really good, because obviously there is a pay hike that they will get out of it. But unless the experience that we have found is that unless you're willing to pay something like what 2x what ISRO does, it's very hard to really get talent outside of from ISRO who are very well trained, for example. And the other part of all of this is that hiring in India is extremely difficult because of the rich nature of talent, because there's going to be 10,000 people applying for 10 positions, and to sort them out, you need an army of people to just look at the applications and look at which are people who are good and which are people who you don't want to spend time on at the end. So it's really the other part of all of this is that talent retention is going to be a big challenge in India, also because people who are operating in space are also then very relevant for other sectors. So after a certain amount of time, if people are not getting paid enough, they will look at other sectors that will pay them, 100, 200% more salaries at the end. So typically, if you are not able to do pay raises in the order of 50 to 30% every year, at some point of time, the talent will simply leave your company. And it's very usual in the US to share equity as a part of the performance appraisals, where people are given out an X amount of shares for their performance in the company and so on. So these kinds of things are still extremely new in India, in the space sector. I don't know about the other sectors, but at least in the space sector, I think this is very new. Only I think I've only seen, I think, Pixel doing it in India, where they give out equity as a part of the performance appraisal, in terms of providing company shares and things like that as a part of the appraisal, including the cash component of all of this. So these are all some of the things related to building teams and attracting talent and things like that are specific challenges. Some of the misconceptions at the end when it comes to the space sector. Unlike a lot of the marketing that happens in the space industry, most of the companies that are building satellites and rockets are not profitable. At the end, you could say that almost nobody who is in the launch industry is profitable today. So including the likes of SpaceX. So if SpaceX did not have its human space flight business unit, its Starlink business unit, SpaceX as a launch company would be extremely unprofitable in its current form. The same with Rocket Lab as well. Even in the case of Rocket Lab, they are a public company now, so you can really look at their annual returns and balance sheets. So, for example, I think the last time I checked, Rocket Lab was losing something like $3-4 million a month as a company. So there is that marketing angle that people are attracted to when it comes to space. And there's the real business angle, which is you need to be able to make money to be able to survive, over the course of time. So that's why doing upstream space companies are not really profitable, even with companies that have existed like Rocket Lab for over 10-15 years, for example. And that's why you have this circle of being able to raise money continuously to be able to see if that can happen sometime in the future. At the end, so the space is not a market where you can enter and exit the market very quickly. So it's not something of the nature of e-commerce or many of the B2C markets in India, where people want to build marketplaces and things like these. It's really something that takes more than 10 years to even find good traction in the market. So if you don't have patience in this kind of a market, where really a lot of things need to come together, there's not going to be success. So you can imagine that even for a company like SpaceX, it took them 15 years to reach the first rocket, to have the first reusable rocket that they built, and they had to survive for 15 years to get to the launch pad at the end. So this is a very, very, very long gestation industry to do this. And there's always been a lot of the copy models, like I will build the Amazon for India, I will build the Uber for India, and I will build X for India. And this is the same with China and other places as well. It's very hard to do this in our industry because the conditions are different, the capital markets are different, the government involvement is different, the regulatory environment is different. So there's too many moving pieces where B2C copies of such models have worked over the last 10-15 years. But to do that or to replicate that in the space industry is extremely difficult. So one of the interesting things here is that who will be winners who will come out of India at the end. So the real winners for me are the ones who will look at really original problems and come up with really original solutions. So for a lot of the American companies and European companies who are building space-based solutions, they have no cultural understanding of a place like India or Africa, or they are not able to provide solutions there because they don't have cultural understanding of problems and the price point at which those problems can be solved. So I think really, if you are creating something like what Zerodha did in the in the stock exchange, and have a very good cultural understanding of what happened in India and what is the real solution, that is a very Indian solution to the problem, that has a deep, you have a very deep understanding of the problem and the customer. And so there is that bit of innovation that you need to of really understanding the problem from an Indian perspective to then provide a solution at a price point that which people will take that up, right? So these are some of the things that I've not still seen many people think about to a large extent, and that's worthwhile spending time on, because obviously India is a extremely large market that is growing in terms of applications, and with the demographic dividend and other things that are coming out, right? So just as a closing note, as a part of the think tank that we started, for some of you who are interested in stuff like space history, for example, we have recorded a number of scientists and their memories. So you can go and check out our website on Spaceport Sarabhai, and you can find a photo archive. You can find memoirs of people who are talking about the challenges that they uh, were found themselves in maybe 30, 40 years ago when they were starting out as space people. Some of them who were directly hired by Professor Sarabhai and today are like over 80 years old and talking about their journey as very early engineers in ISRO. So this is something that I want to leave you out with, because it's a very inspirational thing to see that those people have laid the foundation on which many of us stand today. And then, so some of you who are really interested in this sector, I do run a podcast called New Space India. It has over 110 episodes, I think, as of today, where we have everyone who is in the startup ecosystem, who is an investor or a all kinds of people who have featured on guests. And if you want to learn about this sector and participate, this may be one area you will find a lot of the content around the thinking in the sector and so on. So other than that, thank you for having me here. I wish I was there in person, but if you have any questions, and feel free to shoot it. And I hope this was useful for anybody who is interested in starting space companies. You can always feel free to reach out to me if you're interested in discussing how to start up a particular idea, or if you want to brainstorm some of the things. I'm always happy to do that with people who want to build companies in this sector. Thank you.
Thank you for the insightful talk. Any questions?
Hello, sir.
I can hear you.
Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
My name is Sudhir and my question is, what advice would you give to a student interested in entrepreneurship in the aerospace sector, especially those who aim to make a meaningful impact?
I'm sorry, I really didn't get your question now. The voice is really muffled.
Okay, what advice would you give to a student interested in pursuing entrepreneurship in the aerospace sector, especially those who aim to make a meaningful impact?
If I repeat your question, you're asking what advice I would give an aerospace student who is looking to start a company. Is that it?
So my question is, what
Yeah.
what advice would you give to a student interested in pursuing entrepreneurship in the aerospace sector, especially those who aim to make a meaningful impact?
As I said, I mean, at the end, I think it's a question of building a team of people. Aerospace is not a sector where individual founders can, do a lot of things, because at the end, this is a sector where you need a team of people who understand both the technical business aspects of the industry at the end. So I think anybody who's looking to start out, you need, I had the slide there of competencies of people. So you need an engineer who understands the technical aspects of it. You need a business person who understands the business perspective of it, or you need somebody who's an engineer who is then a business person who can help you sell your idea to investors and to customers and things like this. So unless and until you have, so if you want to be an aerospace student who is then looking at starting a company, then build a team that has both these competencies. Have somebody who's working the technical aspect of the idea, and have somebody who is working the business aspect of the idea at the end. And it's better to have somebody who has a foundation in business, who has a foundation in technology, who's then, for example, if you have an IITM engineer who has done an MBA in IIM and is looking to raise capital for you, or is looking to sell your idea to customers while you focus on the technology development, that's when you have the competencies that are required to do the technology development and to do the business development at the same time. So these two, if you are able to combine these two competencies in your team, that's when you have the at least the bare bones of the necessary foundation to be able to then be successful as a company.
Hi, sir. So, what about the new markets like, let's say, microgravity research? So, what is your viewpoint on that?
Yeah, it's a very exciting new area for sure. I would recommend you following a company like called Space Forge out of the UK. Uh, they're making some very interesting claims that they are able to produce materials that are necessary for the semiconductor industry, that can only happen with production being taking place in a microgravity environment. So they have this mission that is now going up to space, where they will fly a particular satellite that is going to have some sort of a production capacity for some new materials that is going to work in microgravity to be able to produce those materials, because it's cheaper to produce those materials in a microgravity environment that exists in space than on the Earth. And so they're going to produce that, and then they have this mission of that being flying back to the Earth and retrieving it back to be able to then sell that to the semiconductor industry. There's a lot of interest in areas like biotechnology, because there's been a few companies around the world that are now starting out to fly missions that have some research angle to this, where they believe that either some sort of reactions will happen in microgravity better, or some new kinds of processes can occur because of microgravity. So there's been a fair few interesting missions that are going up when it comes to doing biotechnology related research in microgravity as well. And the same thing for some of the materials as well. There's been a few companies that have tried to grow some crystals in space which involve growing them in microgravity environments and so on. So this is a extremely new area as well. But again, the secret there to making a successful business is to know which are the most important areas where volume for these kinds of missions are present, and which are the areas in which customers are ready to pay for these kinds of things. And often, while you can do such missions in India, the customer will be in the US or in other places where such research areas in which semiconductor materials and other things are still not existent in India. Semiconductor design, is existing in India, but not really manufacture or materials part of it. So it's also then a question of, do you have access to those customers who's going to then buy this service from you?
Thank you, sir, for the talk and the solving their doubts.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And
Thank you, sir.
yeah, thank you, and have a nice Saturday evening. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.